Okay, welcome to EGR 445. And in last class, we talked about the gear design. So the first step in gear design is using the beam strength equation. So the beam strength equation. And this beam strength equation is very basic equation which talks about the force, which is the tangential force, is equal to stress multiplied by area multiplied by a factor y. This y is called as Lewis's form factor. Now, typically, B by M, B is the face width, M is module. This ratio is given to us. And if this ratio is not given to us, we can refer to the design data book and find this ratio. Typically, this ratio can go anywhere between 10 to 12. And please understand, this is sort of the design problem, which means we have to refer to the design data book. So I would just somewhere between 10 to 14. Now, this sigma is sigma O. Sigma W. Sigma W is equal to, this is also called as the working stress, which is nothing but the velocity factor Cv multiplied by sigma O. And sigma O is the static strength. The next equation that we have to look at, is the dynamic load equation. Dynamic load equation. And this equation for dynamic load, it comes from the dimensional analysis or Buckingham Pi analysis. And that equation is given as WD is equal to WT plus WI, where WT is the tangential load and WI is the intermittent load. This load is given as BC plus WT divided by 21V plus square root of VC plus WT. And in last class, I spent some time talking about how to find out these factors, how to get the value of B, how to get value of C, and so on. And for that, you would have to refer to the table, and from the table, which is table 28.5, so refer table 28.5 on page 1040. And from there, you should be able to find out the values. Now, the key question is that the gear tooth is going to be subjected to the dynamic load? Would the gear material sustain this dynamic load? So for that, what we need to do is we need to find out something called as the static or the endurance load. So here is the question. WD or the dynamic load is the actual load on the gear tooth. Actual load on gear tooth. Can gear tooth sustain WD? And for that, what we find is we find the endurance load. We find something called as WS. Now, what is WS? WS is again given as sigma E multiplied by B multiplied by pi multiplied by M multiplied by Y. Now, this equation is exactly same as the beam strength equation. So note, this is the side note. This equation is exactly same as WT is equal to sigma W times B times pi times M times Y. However, sigma E is the strength of the material, which is the endurance strength of the material. And sigma W is the working stress on the material. So now the question is, how do we find out sigma E? Now for this, let's understand what do we mean by endurance strength. What do we mean by endurance strength of the material? Does anyone remember? That is something like the fatigue strength, which means that is the stress that material can withstand for infinite number of cycles. And for an example, you might have studied this concept of fatigue strength, like you have something called as the SN curve, wherein you have sigma and you have number of cycles. And what you have is you have a specimen, and this specimen is kind of loaded. And then on this specimen, there is some load. And what you do is you gradually increase the load. In other words, you gradually increase the stress and find the number of cycles it takes for the material to fail. So for an example, if the stress is high, it can withstand less number of cycles. If the stress is low, then it can withstand more number of cycles. So basically what you do is you perform lots of experiments and then finally found out that you will have something like a straight line. So you have a shape wherein initially it drops down and then it remains horizontal. What does it mean? It means if your stress is somewhere below this threshold, then the material can withstand infinite number of cycles. For practical purposes, the number of cycles are 10 to the power 6. But so the idea is, what is the fatigue strength of the material? And this endurance strength of the material, you can find out from the textbook. Now, I have to caution you. There are two types of endurance strengths, okay? And this is not clear. So look at the gear profile. This is the gear profile. there is something called as the core endurance strength, which means the strength of the material which is here. Okay, this is the endurance strength of the material over here. And there is something called as the surface endurance strength, which is the endurance strength of the material over here. Now, these two values are different. So at the surface, what you have, this is called as sigma ES, which is the endurance strength at the surface. And here, what you have is, you have sigma E, which is the endurance strength at the core. And for the static calculation or finding out the static strength, we have to find out the surface, not the surface. We have to find out the core endurance strength. So for that, you will use table 28.2, 28.8. So this equation will use the values from table 28.8. So quickly, I want you to look at table 28.8, wherein you have the material for the pinion, material for the gear, say gray cast iron, semi-steel, Prosper bronze, steel, and you will see Brinell hardness number, and you will see the flexural endurance strength. Are you with me so far? So table 28.8, page 1042. I would strongly recommend that you quickly look at that table because it can be confusing. If you have the textbook, please open the textbook, hard copy or soft copy, and look at page 28.8. Table 28.8 on page 1042. Now, one thing I want you to observe. Look at page 1043, which is the page which is nice next to it. There again, you have the exact same table. Please understand, you have the exact same table, but you have values of surface endurance strengths. So one table gives you the flexural endurance strength, and the other table gives you surface endurance strength. The column, two columns on the left are the same, but the column on the right is different. In one case, on 28.8 is flexural endurance strength, and 28.9 is surface endurance strength. So when we are trying to find out the static tooth load, WS, we have to use flexural endurance strength. Flexural means flexing, which is bending, which is core, because it's a core phenomenon. So WS, a sigma S comes from sigma E comes from page 28.8. So this is flexural endurance limit or stress. So please be careful of that. Now, here there are some guidelines for safety. For safety, WS has to be greater than equal to 1.25 WD for steady load. WS is greater than equal to 1.35 WD for pulsating load. And WS is greater than 1.5 WD for shock loads. It is important to observe that the flexural strength is the function of hardness. So for an example, if you are using the steel gear, sigma E, which is the flexural endurance strength, is given as 1.75 times Brinell hardness number, and this value will be in megapascals. So many a times what happens is the design problem can be something like this. They give you the material and you have to find out the appropriate dimensions. Sometimes everything is unknown. So you don't know dimensions, you don't know the material. So you start with certain material based on the design recommendations. Design, and then finally understand that the design is failing. So you have two choices. Either change the material or change if you are using steel in particular, because majority of the gears are made up with steel. So what you can do is you can change the hardness that can be achieved with some type of surface treatment. Because please understand, the endurance strength is the function of hardness. So for some reason, you see that the strength that you need is greater than what is given for that particular hardness, then you can just simply say that we would add a heat treatment, or we would actually harden the material, or we would use sort of some type of annealing, some type of heat treatment that would give us more flexural strength. So as a designer, you have choice, you have different options. Now next part is determination of the wear load. So next step is the determination of wear load. Now what is this wear load? So please understand, when two gear teeth come in contact, there are something called as Hertzian stresses. There are very high contact stresses, and these high contact localized stresses can cause pitting or microscopic material removal. So we want to make sure that even though the Hertzian contact stresses are very high, the gear is able to sustain those high contact stresses. So for that, we need to find out the wear load. Wear load is the maximum amount of load that the gear can sustain before wearing out. Once again, wear load is the maximum amount of load that gear can sustain before it fails in wear. So wear load is the maximum load gear can sustain before wear failure. And wear failure, that does not mean the gear breaks out or tooth breaks or the material gets removed. Wear could be simply like pitting, a teeny tiny material gets chipped off. But as the gear continuously meshes, the gear teeth come in contact, more and more material gets removed, and finally the gear teeth wear out. So maximum load that can sustain before wear, that can be given as this equation, WW, which is the wear load, that is given as dP times B times Q times K. This again is Buckingham equation. And wear load is always calculated for pinion. So this is always. calculated for pinion. dP is the dia of pinion. B is width. Q is the ratio factor. And this ratio factor is given as 2 times velocity ratio divided by velocity ratio plus 1. This is for external gears. This is also 2 times Tg divided by Tg plus Tp, where Tg, yeah. So pinion is the small gear and the gear is the big gear. Now, when you talk about driving gear and driven gear, pinion could be the driving gear or the gear could be the driving gear. What I mean by that, if you have motor that is attached to the pinion, so this is the motor. So motor is going to drive the pinion and the pinion is going to drive the gear. So this becomes driven and this becomes driver or driver. Sometimes you can drive the gear. So motor could be attached to the gear and the pinion is driven. So either way is possible. But this is for external. So this is for external. And the ratio factor is 2 times VR divided by VR minus 1, which is equal to 2 times TG divided by TG minus TP for internal gears. So what I mean by that is you have gears like this. So you have an internal gear. So, and velocity ratio is number of teeth on gear divided by number of teeth on pinion. Everyone understood? Any questions here? Now, how do you find out the value of K? To find value of K, there are two techniques that you can use. So value of K can be found out from the equation K is equal to sigma ES square sine phi divided by 1.4 multiplied by 1 divided by EP, which is the Young's modulus of pendulum. I mean, Young's modulus of pinion, sorry, divided by 1 divided by Young's modulus of gear. So sigma ES is the surface endurance strength or endurance limit that comes from table 28.9, which is page 1043. Then C is the pressure angle. EP is the Young's modulus for pinion. Eg is the Young's modulus for gear. Now, one thing that you want to do, think about is how would you get the Young's modulus for pinion and Young's modulus of gear. It actually depends upon whether you are using same materials like steel, or if you are using cast iron and steel. So you want to use the appropriate value, and that would give you the value of K. Once again, there is another equation that I want you to remember. In certain cases, if the value of sigma ES is not given, sigma ES can be estimated as 2.8 times BHN, which is Brinell hardness number, minus 70 in Newton per millimeter square. And one thing, please note, sigma ES is usually greater than sigma E, which is sigma flexural. The last part is, what are the different types of failures for the gear? And please understand, we don't want our gear to fail in wear. So what that means is WW has to be greater than or equal to WD. In other words, wear load has to be greater than equal to dynamic load. Are you with me so far? This is the basic gear design process. However, the story does not end here, because one important aspect of gear design is designing the shafts. So just to give an example, say you have say a gear, something like this. This gear is attached to the shaft, and there are different ways the shaft could be supported. So this could be a cantilevered shaft, or this could be a simply supported shaft. So for example, you can have here like this. And you could have bearings here and here. Depending upon how the gear is supported, the shaft design is going to change. Now let's try to understand what are the forces on the gear and how is shaft design different depending upon the type of support structures. So first and foremost, let's understand that we have a tangential force, WT. And then what we have is, we have a normal force, which is at the pressure angle. So this pressure angle is phi. So this angle is phi. And in addition, what we have is, we have something called as the radial force. So this is WR. So on the gear, the force structure is three-dimensional. You have a tangential force, but tangential force is causing that gear to rotate. That tangential force is at an angle phi with respect to normal force. So if you look at this triad, and I'm going to show you this triad, this force triad looks something like this. This is WN, This is WT and this is WR. So on gear, on the point of contact, you have the normal force and you have the component of normal force is tangential force and radial force. Now, step number 1, we know the torque. Torque is equal to the tangential force WT multiplied by the radius of the gear. How would we find out Wn? Wn is equal to WT divided by, please understand, WT, this angle is phi, which is cosine of phi. WT divided by cosine of phi is going to give me Wn. WR, which is the radial force, is nothing but Wn multiplied by sine phi. In other words, WR is equal to WT cosine phi. So these equations are super important when you are trying to solve the forces on the gears. Now let's try to understand how would you design the shaft. Now, because of this complex force action, please note that you have torque and then you have moment. But the moment is actually, you have two moments. You have a moment in the horizontal direction. So I want to show you, you have the moment in the horizontal direction and you have the moment in the vertical direction. You have the moment in the vertical direction. So if you want to really find the moment, what you want to do is you want to draw the front view and you want to draw the top view. So I'll show you how would it look. So if you were to look at the front view, in the front view, your moment is going to look like this. So if this distance is L, this moment is going to be WR times L. And if you look at the top view, you're going to see WT. And your moment, I'll show the figure on the right hand side, which will be WT times L. These two moments are perpendicular to each other. Can you see that these two bending moments, one bending moment is in horizontal plane, other bending moment is in vertical plane. So the total bending moment will be the resultant of these two bending moments. So you have BM in the horizontal plane, BM H, and you have BM in the vertical plane. So the resultant bending moment, BM R, is equal to square root of bending moment horizontal square plus bending moment vertical square. In addition to the bending moment, you have torque. So the T equivalent is equal to square root of BMR square plus T square. And once you find out the value of TEQ, you can find out tau is equal to TEQ divided by J multiplied by R, which is TEQ divided by J is pi d raised to 4 by 32 times d by 2. And once you solve this equation, you will get the value of d. Everyone understood this? That is how you will design the shaft. There is one variation possible. So the problem that we solved is for cantilevered gear, but sometimes the gear could be simply supported, which means you can have supports on either side. So what changes? In that particular case, you will again draw the bending moment diagram, but you will have to draw the bending moment diagram in the horizontal plane, and you have to draw the bending moment diagram in the vertical plane. So there will be a bending moment diagram, something like this. And there will be a bending moment diagram, something like this. And these two bending moment diagrams are perpendicular to each other. So there will be BM H, and there will be BM V, and then you can use these two in these equations, find out the resultant bending moment, then find out the equivalent torque, and then you can solve the equation. Everyone understood this? The next thing is, how would you design a gearbox? So once you have found out the important dimensions of the gear, important dimensions of the pinion, then gearbox design is mostly governed by the geometry of the gears, the location, the space that you have, and so on. So let's understand, say you have to design a gearbox. Step number one to design the gearbox is to draw the gears in front view and top view, or front view and side view. So see, you have the gears like this. The side view of the gears, and you can do that very easily in SolidWorks. So you will know this is the gear, and this is the pinion and the gear. So you have pinion and you have gear. Once you have decided the gear, many a times they will tell you that the gear is overhang, or the pinion is overhang, or the gear is simply supported, or the pinion is simply supported, whatever the configuration may be. Depending upon the configuration you choose, or depending upon the configuration that is specified in the problem, you will have the shaft designs for the gear and for the pinion. So you will have shaft designs. So this is something you have already drawn. Then what you will do is, you have to provide, this shaft needs to be supported. And to support the shaft, you have to use bearings. There are two types of bearings that you can use. You can use the sliding contact bearings, which are nothing but like bushings. And you can use the rolling contact bearings, which is like ball bearing or roller bearing. Sometimes those bearings are given to us. Sometimes those bearings we have to select. Assuming you are going to choose a sliding contact bearing or a rolling contact bearing, you would specify the bearing. Bearing would have an inner race and it will have an outer race. So you will draw inner race and outer race. Now this bearing needs to be supported in the housing. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to draw a slightly bigger picture here. So this is the shaft of the gear. And what you have is, you have this bearing over here. Say this bearing is a rolling contact bearing. So something like this. And here there's a ball, here there's a ball. Now this bearing needs to be situated in the housing. So this is the shaft. So you should have housing. So this is going to look like this. And this is the gear. And this bearing needs to have a bearing cover. So you would have a bearing cover. Sometimes the bearing are preloaded. So and then if it's again the simply supported, then you will gonna have a seat, something like this. And same thing will be on the top side. So this is how you will design the housing. So to design the housing, you can actually show it something like this. And usually this gear train would run in an oil bath. So there will be oil here. Now, one thing I want to tell you is sometimes it's a good idea to see the heat dissipation characteristics of the gear train. So for an example, in this particular example, it's just two gears they are meeting. So that heat generation may not be significant. But if you have an automotive transmission where the gears continuously get shifted, the vehicle goes up gear, down gear, up shift, down shift continuously. At that time, the amount of heat that is generated could be significant. So the way you do it is you look at the heat generated, Q generated is equal to 1 minus efficiency multiplied by power transmitted. Typically, the gear trains, depending upon the type of gear train you use, would have anywhere between 85 to 90% of efficiency. That is the power transmission for the gear train, which means about 10 to 15% of the power is lost in friction or in the heat. So this loss of power is dissipated in the form of heat. So what happens is the oil that is in contact with the gears will get heated. This oil will get circulated. It will come in contact with the casing, and that casing would act as a heat sink and dissipate that heat. So Q generated, this oil needs to transfer this heat from the gear to the casing. So that's why if you were to look at the automotive power transmission, if you touch the transmission, you will see that the transmission is hot. As a matter of fact, if you see any gear train, and if you touch the gear train, you will see that it is at slightly higher temperature. The reason for that is power transmission is never 100% efficient. There is always some loss of power. That loss of power is dissipated in the heat. So heat generated is 1 minus efficiency multiplied by power. And this equation is valid for continuous power transmission. If the power transmission is intermittent, for an example, it's like start and stop. In other words, you have gears getting engaged, gears getting disengaged in automotive transmission. Like you are going from first gear to second gear to third gear, either by manual transmission or for the automotive transmission, the amount of heat generated is more. And at that time, there will be factors 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, depending upon the operation, that you will have to multiply that the heat generated. Then this heat dissipated, Q dissipated, is given as H A delta T, where H is the heat transfer or heat convection coefficient. A is the surface area of housing. And delta T is the difference in the temperature. So let's take an example that you have a gear, you designed the gear, and this is the diameter of G, dg. Then you have this diameter of pinion, dp. Now let's look at the housing. Housing should be able to cover at least the area of the gear. So area of housing, AH, and this is the minimum, is area of the gear plus area of the pinion multiplied by 2, top and bottom. So this is the area of housing. And clearly there could be additional area, but that you can ignore. So this is the area of the housing. Now value of H is the heat transfer coefficient or heat convection coefficient. It depends upon whether there is free convection or there is forced convection, which means this gearbox, if this gearbox has some type of a fan, so some gearboxes, they have some type of a fan attached to the shaft. So what happens is, as this fan rotates, the air is continuously forced to move over the casing. So this coefficient, it could be 0.25 to 0.5 to 0.8, that you can refer to the design data book, and it will tell you the value of the heat transfer coefficient in watt per meter square degree Celsius. So H is given as watt per meter square degree Celsius. And then you can identify the temperature. Typically, depending upon, so how do you decide delta T? Now this delta T is dependent on the type of oil you choose. Every oil has a temperature range. Within that range, that oil can withstand, or oil can sustain its lubrication and cooling properties. Usually that range is about 30 to 40 degrees. So you can specify the value of 40 and then find out the heat dissipation. And for the gear transmission to work continuously, the heat dissipation capacity has to be greater than the heat generated. Only then that gearbox can sustain. In certain cases, if you find out that heat generated is significantly higher than heat dissipated, then what do is, they basically circulate the oil through an oil cooler. So what you have is, you have a heat exchanger, some type of a heat exchanger, and this heat exchanger, or you have an oil cooler. So basically what you have is, you have an oil cooler. So almost all the automotive transmission, unless the transmission is sealed, if you work if you have, what happens is the transmission oil cooler is co-located within the radiator. So what happens is there is transmission line, oil lines. They go from transmission. That hot oil gets recirculated in the part of the radiator. That oil gets cooled and is fed back. If the transmission is sealed, in that case, they make sure that the area of dissipation, area available for the dissipation of heat, it's sufficient for the oil to maintain its properties. So these are all the steps in gear design. Now with this, we are ready to solve for the uh, for the gear design problem. But as promised, let me give you the step-by-step recipe, which is the design procedure for the gear train. And this procedure is going to be similar for the helical gear. So next chapter is going to be the design of helical gear. So what we are going to do, we are going to follow the steps of the spur gear design. We will take the helical gear and convert that into an equivalent spur gear and follow the exact same procedure. That's why I spent a lot of time on spur gear design, because spur gear design is the basis for helical gear design, worm gear design, bevel gear design. So that's what, once you understand the spur gear design, all the gears are slight variations of the spur gear design. So what would be given to you for the gear design? Power transmission capacity, P, power transmitted, will be given to you. Speed will be given to you. Sometimes they give you center distance. So step 1, is determination of WT. And please note, power P is 2 pi nt divided by 60. V is equal to pi times d times n divided by 60, where T is the torque, n is the speed. WT is equal to P divided by V multiplied by CS, where CS is called as the service factor or duty factor. Now, what do we mean by service factor or duty factor? Whether the power transmission is continuous, power transmission is intermittent, power transmission includes shock load, if it's a medium duty, heavy duty, light duty, the service factor depends upon that. So just to give you an idea, look at table 28.1. So sorry, 28.10. Table 28.10, that gives you the type of load, intermittent, 8 to 10 hours, and continuous, which is 24 hours. So for an example, steady load, it's 0.8, the service factor CS. For 8 to 10 hours, it's 1. For continuous, is 1.25. So everyone, please look at the table 28.10. Then step 2, we have to use the equation for the beam strength. So this beam strength equation is WT is equal to sigma W multiplied by B multiplied by pi multiplied by M multiplied by Y. Now here comes a very important question, and this question is Q. If gear and pinion are made with different material, which one is weaker? So clearly we want to design the element which is weaker. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to find out sigma W times Y for gear. And then we are going to find out sigma W times Y for pinion. And one thing to understand, this value of Y is dependent on number of teeth. So value of Y for gear and value of Y for pinion is going to be different. So this will be Y of G and this will be Y of P. And then sigma W is nothing but is proportional to sigma O. So this can be, we will actually want to find out sigma O YG and sigma O YP. So which one is weaker? So which one is less? And we design the weaker element. So if the gear is weaker, if gear is weaker, then design gear. If pinion is weaker, then design pinion. Now the next question that comes in mind is if the gear and pinion are made up with same material. So if the gear and pinion are made up of same material, then pinion is always weaker. If gear and pinion are made with same material, then pinion is weaker. So, but many a times the gear is made up with different material, the pinion is made up with different material. The next step is B by M ratio. Typically, B by M, they will give you the value, or you can look at the design data book, which will go anywhere between 9 to 14. So you select appropriate B by M ratio. And there is no right or wrong answer. As long as B by M ratio is within the certain proportions or following the design guidelines, you are okay. Then WT is equal to sigma W multiplied by B multiplied by pi multiplied by M multiplied by Y. Now please note this B will be expressed in terms of module. The next step, so here everything would be known. So you can find out the value of M. So from here, you can find out the value of M. The next step, step 3, is calculation of dynamic load. So the calculation of dynamic load, WD, is equal to WT plus WI. WT we know, WI equation is 21V BC plus WT divided by 21V plus square root of B times C plus WT. And step 4, and next step, step 4. So step 4 is calculation of static endurance load, which is WS is equal to sigma E multiplied by B multiplied by pi multiplied by M multiplied by Y. And we have to check if WS is greater than equal to WD. So static endurance strength or static endurance load should be greater than the dynamic load. Step 5, if it is not, go back and revise. What? Okay. And actually, that is an interesting question because that can happen many times. And I will take an example where you will notice that this criteria fails. At that time, the easiest way to change is the value of B. Because, for example, if you look at this entire equation, if it fails at step 4, you can either change the module or you can change the face width. I typically look at the proportions of the gear and then just change the face width. If changing face width is not going to solve the problem, then I go and change the module. But please understand, as soon as you change the module, the center distance changes. Many a times that is the requirement in the design, that the center distance between the shaft has to be particular, say 100 millimeters. So changing face width is the first line of action if this step fails. Everyone understood this? The second thing that you can do, which is I change the surface, I change the material. Say for example, if the material is not specified, then what I do is I just want to go to table 28.8. Can you see that steel, depending upon the Brinell hardness number, steel can have Brinell hardness number changing from 150 all the way to 400. So you can have BHN, Brinell hardness number of 150. At 150, the flexural endurance strength of the steel is 250. But if you go to 400, that is 700. Do you agree with me? So that option is also available. If the grade of the steel is not specified or the heat treatment is not specified, you can just say that since the gear is failing at this stage, we recommend increasing the BHN maybe to 360. And that would increase sigma ES. That would give you the static stress greater than the static load greater than the dynamic. Everyone understood this? So this is sort of back and forth that you have to do. Next is step 5, which is calculation. So step 5 is calculation of wear load. And wear load is WW, is given as wear load is always found out for the pinion. So dP times B multiplied by Q multiplied by K. And the steps to find out Q and the step to find out K, I just noted down. We just need to make sure that WW is less than, WD, dynamic load, is less than WW. You have to check this. And then you can find out the module, you can find out the face width, you can find out the diameter, you can find all the dimensions of the gear, and then you can draw a neat sketch of the gear and pinion and draw the sketch. And the last but not least, the next step, which is step 6. Step 6 is design of shafts. And step 7, which is optional. Don't do it unless asked. This is optional. Is design of housing. And that finishes the gear design. Are you with me so far? Did everyone understand? Now, I don't have time to solve the gear design problem, so I'm gonna solve that problem in next class. But please try to understand, on Canvas, I have actually worked out and uploaded 2 or 3 gear design problems, a simple gear design problem and the gear train problem. Please take a look at those, and that should give you a good understanding of how to work out the problem. At any rate, once we come back from spring break, I will actually work out a spur gear design problem from the scratch, and then I will also cover the housing design a little bit, and then we will talk about the lubrication properties, the ZN by P at the tribology concepts, and then we will look at the helical gear design. So I'm going to stop here. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. Yes.
Quiz 4, say 2 stages.
Yes.
That means 2 years or 3 years?
I didn't work out. That is the gear train design. What does that mean? It means you have a primary gear train, and then this is attached to a secondary gear train. So basically, if you have a reduction ratio R1 here, if you have a reduction ratio R2 here, the overall reduction ratio is R is equal to R1 times R2. So this is stage 1. And this is stage 2. Now, how do you decide? Now, there is a concept known as preferred numbers. So how do you so for example, if I want an overall reduction ratio of 9, what should I do? Should I go 3 times 2? I mean 4.5 times 2. It means the first reduction ratio is 4.5. Next reduction ratio is 2. Or should I go first reduction ratio 3 and the next reduction ratio 3? So basically, there is a concept known as preferred numbers. So you choose these reduction ratios which are close to preferred numbers. And again, there are diagrams for gear transmission, powertrain stages determination. I usually don't cover that in this class, but if you guys want, I can in the next class. I would actually talk about how to design a multi-stage gearbox. Because please understand, automotive transmission could be 1:40. So what do you mean? You will have a gear which is maybe 10 centimeters, and you will have a gear which is 40 times 10 centimeters, 400 centimeters. That would be a huge gear. So what you want to do is you want to have a gearbox which is super compact. So you are going to have multiple stages to achieve that gear reduction. Then what is the optimal gear ratio between these multiple trains, and how would you separate those out? That itself requires some type of analysis, and there are diagrams that allow you to actually identify those optimal ratios based on preferred numbers. But for the problem that you have in hand, if it's calling for 2 stages, what I would do is I would just split those 2 stages. I don't know what is the overall reduction ratio. Do you remember? 9. So I would do 3 times 3. That is the best way to do it. Or I would do 4.5 times 2. But if there is any interest, I can actually give you some more information on how to do the staging and how to draw the staging diagram for the gear trains. That's actually what is done in industry. If you go to Ford, or if you go to Chrysler, or if you go to maybe some automotive manufacturer, they are where you get involved in transmission design. That's what you will do. So you can't just randomly choose gear ratios. There are certain rules that you have to follow before finding out the gear ratios. Okay, any other question? Questions from online students? Okay, then I'm going to stop here.